The Farage effect. What are the other parties going to do to counter it? Good evening and welcome to Newsnight Live, each weeknight with interviews and with lots of insight. Since Nigel Farage burst into the election, he's changed the weather in the campaign. Tomorrow night, he'll take his place in the 7-strong BBC TV debate alongside Penny Mordaunt and Angela Rayner, Lib Dems, SNP, Plaid Cymru and Greens. 7 in all, which could make Wednesday's debate with Keir Starmer and Rishi Sunak seem like a polite tea party. Tim Montgomery, founder of the Conservative Home website, and Zing Seng, who's the former editor of the former news organisation Vice UK, are here. And of course, Nick is here too. Nick, first of all, tell me, what do you make of this debate? What's going to happen tomorrow night?
Well, obviously, we had the big head-to-head earlier in the week between Keir Starmer and Rishi Sunak. Pretty sort of fiery. I think it'd be fair to say that they're not the world's most natural communicators. But tomorrow, we're going to see from across the parties, there are going to be 7 people in that debate, some really interesting natural communicators. And let's just highlight 3 of them. Penny Mordaunt for the Conservatives, Angela Rayner for Labour, and a few days after he took over the leadership of Reform UK, Nigel Farage. And just think of the dynamics. Think, for example, of Nigel Farage and Penny Mordaunt. Now, Penny Mordaunt, she's very good at sort of staking out that sort of Elgarian Nimrod territory, quite sort of patriotic. Nobody sort of beats her on that. It'll be very interesting how Penny Mordaunt fares with Nigel Farage, who will probably want to occupy that territory. Penny Mordaunt there to make the case for the Conservative Party in the general election, but might she be thinking of another election? And would she be nervous?
So cynical.
Yeah.
Well, I know.
But also,
would she be nervous? And then the second one, obviously, is Angela Rayner against Penny Mordaunt. Angela Rayner feels liberated and vindicated after Greater Manchester Police said they were not looking into her housing. Penny Mordaunt's been critical of her. Angela Rayner may have a few things to say on that.
but also there is a very big dynamic, Tim, there, because, you know, we're talking about essentially 7 people, plus Michelle Hussein, who is the moderator, and the majority of these are women.
Absolutely, that would be an interesting dimension. Nigel Farage will be the star, I suspect. He's the one that's electrified the election campaign this week. But, you know, there is, and perhaps it's old-fashioned, but I think, you know, how will he treat women? If he looks like he's bullying women in a way that sometimes he could be quite robust with men, people are a little bit more forgiving of being robust with men. And when Rishi Sunak debated Liz Truss in the Tory leadership election, his interrupting of her during those, it cost him a lot, I think, amongst Tory members. They didn't like, rightly or wrongly, a man seemingly to treat a woman with discourtesy. So Nigel Farage has to play it carefully tomorrow. He can't look too boisterous or too aggressive in that forum.
Or indeed too sexist. I mean,
too
straightforwardly.
sexist, yeah.
But how do these debates cut through? What cuts through about them, do you think?
Well, I don't think they cut through like they used to. I think, you know, when the first debates happened with Cameron, Clegg and Brown, it was an electric moment. It was the first time in our recent history. We're seeing reasonable numbers for the Tuesday ITV debate. I think it beats everything else that was on terrestrial TV that night.
But not by much.
But not by much, and the numbers are declining. I think tomorrow will be a little bit different because Nigel Farage is the special new ingredient in this general election. If he can show that he is talking the way he did at his launch on Tuesday to Conservative voters in a way that, frankly, he spoke to me and other, if he can sort of show that he can really peel away even more Conservative voters,
before I come to saying, let me just ask you, the way he spoke to you, how did he speak to you?
Well, when I heard him in a way that I don't, you know, I'm trying to be a loyal Conservative. I'm not always very good at being a loyal Conservative, but when I hear Rishi Sunak, I do not necessarily hear someone who I think is authentically talking in the same way I would like a Conservative leader to talk. When I hear Nigel Farage on immigration, on tax, on British history, identity, on crime, he's talking my language. He's talking the language of the average Conservative activist. If he does that tomorrow...
Might you vote for him?
I've got a superb Conservative MP in Salisbury. I'll vote for him.
Right.
If I was in Clacton, I would definitely vote for Nigel
Interesting.
Farage.
Well, I was saying, what actually cuts through, particularly with a younger audience? What are they looking for? Are they watching?
I think very few young people are sticking around to watch the debate in full. In fact, most of what we see that has done really well online in terms of clips picking up viral traffic are things that have just been clipped from the debates into kind of quick 30-second or less clips, you know, things where you can see the audience reacting. So the moments from the debate that have the most cut through online are things where the audience is responding. They're booing Rishi Sunak. They're clapping for someone else. You know, they're laughing at his inability to grasp the numbers.
Well, are they actually looking for the edit as well? Are they looking to make sure that they're not being sold a pup?
I think one of the things that people tend to forget about younger generations online is that they're very savvy. In fact, they're almost outright suspicious. So when they see something that they think could be presented or misquoted or taken out of context, they're very suspicious and they're very alert to it. So having an audience reaction as part of that clip kind of lets them know, hey, this actually happened in real time. Your kind of feelings and instinct reactions are correct.
Hold it just there. Because a man who knows all about the pivotal moments in election debates is the political advisor Jim Messina, who is nicknamed the Obama White House fixer and campaign supremo. He joins us from Washington. But first, Jim in action in the spin room after the final presidential debate in Florida in 2012, when it was Obama versus Mitt Romney.
You got the impression that he was on the offense, your candidate tonight, and I'm just wondering about that. He interrupted the governor several occasions.
Look, this is a contest about strength. This is about who can be leader, commander-in-chief. And you saw the president be very strong tonight, be strong and steady as his leadership has been for the past 4 years. Romney looked uncertain. Romney spent a bunch of time being wrong on the issues and uncertain about his position.
Well, let's now speak to Jim Messina. Jim Messina, thank you very much. Are you eagerly watching the UK election campaign?
Oh, my goodness, yes. It was great fun the other night with the Starmer-Sunak debate. Absolutely.
So you joined Barack Obama early on in 2011. He was down in the polls. What did you have to do? What was the strategy?
We had to make this election about a choice between Barack Obama and Mitt Romney. I used to say to Barack Obama, if it's a referendum on the incumbent, you will likely lose that. If it's a choice between you and Mitt Romney, you're going to win that choice. And so our job was to take it to Mitt Romney and really make it a choice between two candidates. And we were able to do that, and we won that election.
But Obama did not do well against Mitt Romney in the early debate. I mean, how dangerous can debates be? And actually, you know, this was second time round, this was 2012, and still Obama's not a scrapper, is he?
No, he really doesn't like scrapping, and he doesn't like the back and forth on it. In the first debate, that clip from me that you just showed was the second debate, which we won. The first debate we lost worse than any presidential campaign had ever lost a first debate. And we watched our entire national lead go from 5 or 6 points to basically tied or down a little bit. So debates can really define an election, at least for a little while, and they can sort of bake in people's preconceptions. And I think that's what you're going to have here in the first American debate, which is 2.5 weeks away. The whole world's going to watch that debate, too, to see if it fundamentally alters the terrain.
Now, 2013, on Newsnight, we revealed that you were going to be coming to work with David Cameron for 2015. And then, of course, on the EU referendum, and you were obviously supporting Remain. You're working with Cameron. At that time, in that referendum, you were beaten by Nigel Farage.
It's true. It's true. I was much more involved in the 2015 Cameron campaign, but I did try to help out on the election. I've seen Mr. Farage. He says he's going to come back from the U.S. from helping Trump. I'm not sure he's done much here to help Trump, but he'll definitely make tomorrow night the most interesting piece. Watching him in 2015 when he was a UKIP leader then was some of the most interesting television I've ever seen.
Well, tell me, though, the thing about Nigel Farage is he a team player? I mean, what do you make of him coming back into this race? Because, of course, he wasn't going to enter, you know, and then suddenly, bang, he's a leader of reform. You know, in a sense, is it all about Nigel Farage?
Well, yes and no. Yes, it's always been about Nigel, and he loves. Remember when he announced he was done and wasn't going to be the leader anymore, and he's come back now, I think, 3 times since then. But I think it's just a complete disaster for Rishi Sunak. I mean, you cannot look at the numbers since then and think it's anything other than a problem when you're the incumbent and you start losing your base. This is one of the problems President Biden has right now is he's got base issues, but nothing like Sunak has because of the huge numbers that Reform are getting in some of the early polls. And tomorrow night's debate is likely going to give Farage another moment to talk to Tim and the guys who might actually be his voters.
Well, tell me, if you were going to give some unpaid advice to Rishi Sunak at this stage, then what would it be?
Well, look, when I was running Obama, Bill Clinton woke me up in the middle of the night and said to me about once a month, all elections are always about the future. And I used to say that to David Cameron over and over. You have to define the future. And I think right now, Sunak's sort of getting the worst of both worlds. He's getting killed for his current performance, and I see voters don't understand where he's going to take the country. So I'd say try to get above the fray and explain to people where you're going to take them. And then I would take it to Keir Starmer as much as I could. On the other hand, I'm very happy not to be a Rishi Sunak advisor these days.
But would you be an advisor to Keir Starmer?
It is a good question. What I want to advise the country of the UK is that we need to repair our special relationship with the US. And hopefully, no matter who gets elected and who gets elected in the US, we can do that. I think it's important that we continue to be the closest two allies. And I think the damage Boris Johnson did to that relationship is real. And I think we need to repair it.
Jim Messina, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Well, since Nigel Farage entered the fray, he's made quite an impact on the opinion polls, especially the last 4, Nick.
Well, Kirsty, 4 new polls out today, and here's my nightly caveat about opinion polls. Opinion polls are asking people how they might vote. The only poll that counts is 4 weeks today, how people actually vote. But let's just take a look at these 4 polls, and what we can see is 3 out of 4 of them show that the Reform UK vote is going up. So let's firstly look at the BMG research. That is saying that Reform is at 16%. That's up 5 points. Let's secondly look at Survation. That shows Reform is at 15%, up, wait for it, 7 points. That is the highest ever Survation Reform UK figure. Thirdly, let's look at Redfield Wilton. Reform 17%, up 3 points. And finally, let's look at Ipsos UK. Reform 9%. That's the same, but that is the only one of these opinion polls where most of the research was done before Nigel Farage made that announcement that he would be leading Reform UK in this election.
Nick, well, that's that. But now we're joined by the KC Julian Maylands, who stood for the Tories in the 1980s, more recently was lined up to stand for the Brexit Party and is now standing for Reform. Thank you very much for coming in.
A pleasure.
So, Reform, one-man band, one policy.
No, it's not a one-man band. The fact is, we are not, obviously, yet the government. We're not His Majesty's loyal opposition. So we do not have Chancellors of the Exchequer, shadow Chancellors of the Exchequer, endless ministers, touring all the media outlets, giving the impression that there's a big team. We've got 1, 2 or 3 actually, very famous man. But I have seen and met at least 200 of the Reform UK candidates in the last 3 years. The depth of talent, the depth of commitment, and the fact that they are not looking for a job. Remember, the Tories are all fighting like feral ferrets at the moment to keep their job, not for the country, not to...
It'll be a bonus if any of your lot get a job.
What?
It'll be a bonus if any of your lot got a job.
No, we all come from different walks of life who, with great experience, with an enormous talent. The problem that Nigel Farage will have, and Richard Tice, on the 5th of July, is, out of all this talent, who gets jobs with so much choice?
well, who gets in is the first thing you have to
Yes.
concern yourself with. And I wonder, when you're campaigning, is it simply, it's about immigration, isn't it? That you're banging the immigration drum, that's your big ticket, isn't it?
It's a huge issue for the whole country, but I'm putting forward all our other policies as well. And it's astonishing to me that we are stumbling towards a possible war in Europe, a possible war in the Middle East. On the horizon is a possible war in the Far East. And is Cameron talking about it? Is Sunak talking about it? Is anybody talking about it?
Let's look at some policies. You want to
Yes.
cut taxes, but the OBR says we're going to have to increase taxes. We've got, or else you're going to have massive public spending cuts. Are you on the side of massive public spending cuts?
We are not on the side of massive public spending cuts. We are on the side of cutting out incredible wasted public expenditure.
Right, but some things you do want to spend on. You want to put tax relief of 20% on private education, tax relief on private healthcare as well. That would create a two-tier England, wouldn't it?
No, the fact is the National Health Service, we all agree, should be free at the point of delivery. Everybody agrees that. But equally, everybody agrees that it is not delivering first-class healthcare. Therefore, we've got a great expert on this, Dr. David Bull. My own eldest daughter is, in fact, in the National Health Service, and we have a plan that those who can't get quick enough treatment, which is a vast number of people at the moment, will get a private healthcare paid-for voucher.
Which will cost a fortune. Let me just ask you, though, you weren't expecting this election to happen so quickly. How many seats will Reform candidates be standing in?
I personally actually don't know the number, but we are all committed, and I hope we have enough time before 4 o'clock tomorrow to stand in every seat.
Which is the deadline.
Is the deadline. And
if you're standing in every seat,
yes.
and it's at short notice,
yes.
How have you vetted candidates? How do you know? Well, you've already got some problems with candidates. You've had a candidate who was convicted of abusing a dog. You've had to drop candidates over racist comments. How are you going to vet your candidates?
Let's be fair. We have to be sympathetic, and I'm not going to throw the first stone. But in the Police and Crime Commissioner election in Wiltshire, in which I stood, the first election was void because the Conservative candidate had a disqualifying criminal conviction. He'd got through vetting with 100+ years.
Are you vetting candidates right this minute?
We are vetting candidates. But I mean, MI6 vetted Philby. You can't have a perfect system and all parties let some through, despite every possible effort. Our efforts are extremely good, and our candidates are vetted and are terrific. And I've met 200 at least of them.
Right. Finally, Reform, you've admitted your pledges are going to cost in excess of $70 billion a year, which is far in excess of Liz Truss's mini budget that spooked the financial markets.
Well, I haven't admitted that. I don't know who's admitted that or where.
It's in the manifesto. It's in your manifesto.
But you haven't taken
last
into
manifesto.
Account or what this manifesto.
This is the draft manifesto you've published.
Yes,
you're going to be, your spending pledges would cost in excess of $70 billion a year.
You haven't taken into account the huge savings and netted off the savings against the expenditure. We're going to redirect public expenditure, cut out waste, and run government efficiently, because all our candidates have had to run businesses, have a real life. They didn't do hobby degrees at university and then get a job.
Degrees. Thank you very much indeed, Julian Maylands.
My pleasure.
What do you make of that, Nick?
Well, Kirsty, some interesting threads from that interview with Julian Maylands there. Obviously, Reform UK hope and believe that the arrival of Nigel Farage as their new leader will transform their fortunes. But Julian Maylands is saying we're not just a one-man band. We've got some very interesting candidates. He's saying he's met 200 of them. Yes, we're talking about immigration, but also talking about an international perspective, warning about war in Europe, warning about war in the Middle East.
Right, back to our guests again. Do you think reform is ready for prime time?
Well, I mean, all will be discovered when Nigel Farage takes the stage on Friday. And I think the real issue with this kind of bounce in the polls is whether or not this is a temporary thing, because suddenly people have been reminded that Nigel Farage exists, or whether this is a sustained bounce that is going to see the Conservatives off during the election. And I think if I was in Conservatives, I would be sweating bullets right now, because, you know, if Nigel Farage performs well on Friday, then that is a very clear and present danger for the Conservative Party.
Even though, as you know, we're hearing now, we've just heard from one candidate, the possibility is that they're going to field candidates by 4 o'clock in every seat. The chances are they haven't vetted those candidates.
Well, so I think there is a possibility, Kirsty, that crossover, as they're calling it, will happen in 1 or 2 opinion polls. You know, the polls that Nick showed us a few minutes ago show that Reform and the Conservatives are quite close. There'll be 1 or 2 that happen quite soon that show Reform ahead of the Conservatives. I don't think they'll be real, and I don't think they will be sustained because of these candidates. I don't think Nigel Farage, Richard Tice are racist or suspect, but frankly a lot of people who normally attach themselves to UKIP and Reform are, and that will be exposed over the next few weeks, and I think we'll see Reform vote for. What matters though, in the 72 hours after one of those crossover polls is published, will the Conservative Party panic? Will they completely lose it? Which the Conservative Party, as you may have noticed, is capable of doing on occasions. And the mood in the Conservative Party is very fragile at the moment. If those polls start to show that the Conservative Party isn't heading just for defeat, but for a cataclysmic result, that sort of panic...
What happens?
That sort of panic could mean that the crossover becomes sustained. That holding of nerve over the next 72 hours or so is really important.
It's interesting what Tim is saying. I mean, the expectation is that we won't have to wait too long to find that Reform UK do overtake the Conservative Party in the polls. And
in 1 or 2 polls.
As you say, that may not stay the same, that may not be produced on election day. But the atmosphere in the party at the moment is febrile. And when that happens, even though it's an expectation, I think the atmosphere will be very, very difficult for Rishi Sunak.
But let's look particularly at what young people are doing here. What young people, I mean, does Reform cut through in social media? Who is cutting through in social media?
I think what's been really interesting about this election campaign is that the big moment that I've seen really go viral online has been the milkshake incident involving Nigel Farage, but mainly to his detriment. So there have been memes showing, you know, the golden ratio imposed over that incredibly famous Newswire photo of the girl hurling the milkshake onto Nigel Farage. You know, the memes about Nigel Farage online are not exactly positive. But at the same time, if you subscribe to the idea that all publicity is good publicity, even the bad ones, then you could say that Nigel Farage is maybe laughing.
Yeah. Well, part of Nigel Farage's stick, though, is that everyone's against him, the establishment's against him, and that.
Well, that was the Donald. There's the Donald Trump playbook, isn't it?
And you know that idea of being attacked, but still going on, standing up for people. He won't be unhappy with that milkshake thing either.
And tell me, on the question of other parties and how things are going, let's look at the Liberal Democrats. What's their social media presence been like? Has it been helpful to Ed Davey?
So I think when Ed Davies really put himself front and centre of the Liberal Democrat social media policy, you know, paddleboarding, falling off the paddleboard, doing a drum ceremony, I think a lot of people looked at it and they thought to themselves, hold on a second, is this guy for real? But then, interestingly, now he's come out with this very empathetic, very heartfelt video about his experience caring for his son with severe disabilities, his experience caring for his mother who was seriously ill. And I think what he's done is create a very clever narrative. He's kind of injected himself into a public conversation. It's kind of a joker figure. And now people are starting to think, oh, wait, this guy's actually quite serious and he seems to have a heart of gold.
So we are now going to move a little bit, Nick, because we're going to talk to you about D-Day. And what do you think has been most striking with what's been happening?
Well, there's a curious element about what happened with D-Day today, because you think D-Day 1984, Margaret Thatcher was there. Sorry, 1984, Margaret Thatcher was there. 1994, John Major was there. 2004, Tony Blair was there. They were there for the ceremonies. And then this afternoon, yes, Rishi Sunak was there, but then he wasn't there. And we can just look, there's an interesting picture where we have the world leaders at the D-Day celebrations, and we can look to see that David Cameron, Lord Cameron, is the British representative next to President Macron of France, Chancellor Scholz of Germany, and there you are on the far right. There is Joe Biden. We don't have Rishi Sunak. And that cleared the way for, let's have a look at another picture and we'll see who is meeting President Zelensky of Ukraine. That would be Keir Starmer. And so the great mystery was, why was Rishi Sunak not there? And we heard on ITV News tonight, I understood that this was said, I haven't seen it, that Paul Brand, it is confirmed, Paul Brand, their political correspondent, has confirmed that Rishi Sunak came back to do an interview with him in which he denied that he was a liar.
OK, can I just absolutely nail this one? The Prime Minister came back early from the D-Day commemorations to do an interview to try and clear his name.
I understand that that is what is said, but I didn't see Paul Brand say that.
What do you make of that, Tim?
Well, I want to put my head in my hands. I don't understand it. Look, I don't want to prejudge this. If there is something in like Rishi Sunak's family that he had to come back for, we do not know for sure.
No, but Paul Brand is saying that he did come back.
Well, if he came back for an interview,
today was
a political interview from the D-Day commemorations, that is indefensible.
So
absolutely indefensible.
Paul Brand, to be clear,
yeah,
is saying that is the slot that ITV was offered. That was the slot that Sunak's team offered.
Well, I really am. Before I came on this programme, I thought this would come up. I rang all of the contacts I could in Downing Street, saying to give me some sort of ammunition to use tonight, and I've got no response. I don't think they know how to defend what has happened. Unless it is a personal tragedy, and I believe what you've just said, it's extraordinary that the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, at a time where the King, you know, he's advanced his medical treatment, so he was there. This is going to be the last commemoration where survivors, a big commemoration where survivors will be present. I think it's political malpractice of the highest order if Rishi Sunak absented himself for an election interview on ITV.
It's not very prime ministerial, is it?
Well, it's just not dignified. It's not the right thing to do at a fundamental level.
I think also it's interesting that you had Jim Messina talking about getting someone into number 10 who can repair the special relationship. It's not exactly repairing the special relationship if you sort of disappear halfway through a D-Day ceremony to kind of tend to your own political reputation.
Thank you very much indeed. Let's take a quick look now at a few of the stories on the front page. And obviously there, the Times pictures there, Joe Biden, the Macrons walking with aircraft overhead. Reform surge as a new poll shows Farage effect is the Independent, the Eye. Financial Times, Macron there with the King. On The Guardian, pressure on Tories to return 50 million donations after new Hester claims. The Telegraph, in the footsteps of heroes. And finally in the Daily Mail, a salute and a prayer for the fallen. And then on the bottom there in the Mail, male health guru Michael Mosley missing in Greece, as we know that he is. Well, that's it for tonight. Faisal is here tomorrow, but before we go, now we can see the Western Allied world's leaders gathered on Omaha Beach today to pay their respects to the heroes of D-Day, the youngest of whom, still alive, are now in their mid-90s. We leave you with that and a previously unheard tape of the final recollections of Field Marshal Lord Bramall, the former head of the British Armed Forces, who passed away in 2019. As a 20-year-old lieutenant, he led a mechanised infantry platoon into Normandy. Good night.
I was at a group waiting to go forward in battle around the headquarter vehicle where there was the company commander, the sergeant major, the driver, the signaller, myself and one other platoon commander. And we were all there, and suddenly all hell was loose. Shells started to fall, and we dived under the vehicle to get some sort of cover, and the shells came nearer and nearer and nearer. And I remember at one time one of us, quite calm we were, funnily enough, saying, "Do you think we've had it?" Suddenly there was an almighty crash, and a shell came and it plumb hit the vehicle, went right through to the bottom. And when the dust cleared, I turned round, and the man laying where you are to me, he was dead and black from head to foot, because he must have taken the whole force of the blast. And all the others, the company commander, company sergeant, the driver, they were all killed except me. And I remember when I got myself up and found out they were all dead, and I felt this burning, I thought I must be on fire. I remember going on the ground and rolling, and it didn't do much good. So that was a nasty experience of being the only person of 7 who survived.